Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today this could be a bit of a rant video, but we're going to talk about the lack of cinema etiquette nowadays. Yes, now I'm a big cinema goer. I have been to many cinema watches this year, let's be honest. I am a big cinema lover. I go a lot. I like to go maybe 3-4 times a week sometimes. Definitely minimum twice a week that I'm in the cinema. I absolutely love it. For instance, in the month of September, I went 8 times in the entire month. And one of those, the weekend, I went 4 times in one weekend. It is just a big part of my life and I go a lot. And I cannot understand for the life of me how people in 2025 have lack of cinema etiquette. And I have a story when I went to go and see Spider-Man 3 the last couple of weeks during the end of September, and it was a awful experience and one of the worst experiences that I've had. I've definitely had bad experiences going to the cinema, in the past. One time when I went to see Flow in 4K, which is that whole cat film, there was a guy in front of me that was just on his phone the entire time. I had to tell him multiple times, to the point that he even went on a flipping video call in the cinema mid-film. And it just didn't make sense to me. Like, why would you answer a bloody video call, let alone, any phone call in the cinema? How can you even hear each other? What's the point? And cinema etiquette just completely goes out the window. You start mainly with phones, of course. Phones nowadays are huge. Even when I went to go and see the film yesterday, at the point of filming this, I went to see one battle after another. And this person was having like food, and he had like chopsticks with his food, and that's fine. Don't get me wrong. He's eating his food, whatever. And then he puts his light on his phone to then sort it out and put the rubbish away, rather than just like put that on the seat next to you and sort it out after the film. Like, you haven't got to sort it out straight away. Like, if I have rubbish, or if I don't know, drop something on the floor, that's gone for me to the entire film. I'm not going to get my light out then to try and find what I'm looking for. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't get some people and how they can just be quite selfish by doing that, like I say. So phones are a problem in general in terms of light, and it really annoys me when you're like looking at the cinema and then you've got this little light in the corner that's flashing and people are just on their phone and it's just moving in between the seats, you know what I mean? Yeah, awful experience. But my experience in Spider-Man 3 was probably the worst ever. And I walked into the screen and I booked row F, and I could see behind there was like 6 13 to 15-year-old boys all together, and I'm thinking, here we go. And they were already quite loud. The lights were on and all of that. And I just thought, oh, here we go. Straight away, this is not going to be great, is it? So I sat there in front of them. I was like kind of in the middle behind the 6. And they're moving back and forth. They're going back and forth the toilet. They're getting ready for the film, but they're still being really loud. Like, oh boy, what's going on in boy? Like, really like loud and trying to be like class clowns, really, if you know what I mean. And they're trying to be the most focal, I guess they're trying to be the most focal people in the room, I guess, and stand out in the group, and whoever's the loudest is the best and the most socially accepted person, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, they're walking back and forth, as I say, and one of the boys walking back in from the toilet, the boy that was directly behind me, he basically had a big tub of popcorn, and then the guy who was walking past must have grabbed a little bit of popcorn and he threw it over me, like as I was sat there on my phone, just as the adverts were on. Anyway, I turned round obviously and said like, what the heck, like, kind of thing. And I just said like, they will just throw you out. If one of you kick off, they will just throw you out. I'll just go and tell them, if you kick off during this film, you're all gone, basically. Whatever. Very deadpan kind of like, yeah. And honestly, when I said that, when that happened, they all stopped. It was immediate. It was just silence, and it was just, yeah. Moving on, we're just moving on. There's not going to be anything. It's just quiet. And that happened for the first hour and 20 minutes, hour and 10 minutes of the film. And then it started to get a bit louder. They started to go to the toilet. They started to like jump down the steps. Anyway, I let them 15 minutes. They started to talk a little bit, but it was no like lights or phones or nothing out of the ordinary. Just like laughing here or there and just making comments and, cinema going. And you're right with that. You're with your friends. You want to engage with the film at the end of the day, and also engage with your friends. But at that point, I got up and went to the toilet myself, and they must have thought I was going to go and tell someone. Because when I came back, they were silent again for like another 45 minutes. They must have thought, oh, you told someone, but I generally just went to the toilet, do you know what I mean? And then, yeah, that was all good. And then the last probably 10 minutes, it was a bit awful, to be honest. And when the film ended, they were like, they all shouted like, yeah, like, as it ended. And, and I would take that, do you know what I mean? So what the moral of the story is, I went in and I set a precedent straight away. Like, I knew that those kids were going to act up. If I don't say anything now, they're going to do it. So I'm glad they threw the popcorn one over me, because it allowed me to then turn around and show my, I guess, adultness and be like, boys, they're just going to throw you out. If you mess around, they're going to throw you all out, and I'm going to watch you, basically. I then get up to go to the toilet, genuinely. They think I'm obviously going to be telling them off when I didn't, and then they're quiet again. So straight away then they knew, don't mess this guy around, because he's going to just tell on us and we're going to be thrown out, and we want to actually watch the film. And we had a good time in the end. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, at the end, I'd take that any day of the week in terms of them screaming at the end of the film, because the film's over at that point and I don't care. But it can be a bit painful. Going to the cinema etiquette can be painful. You know, if anything, on that day, the people behind me weren't even that bad. The couple in front of me were more annoying. Because I don't know if you guys know, but in View, if you pull up especially in my cinema, my View cinema, if you pull up the middle armrest, it can become like a sofa and you can kind of be close to your other half, I guess. And the couple in front were like, honestly, borderline, like, what's going on down there kind of thing. Because like at one point she fell off the seat onto the floor, and that was more distracting than the boys behind me, to be honest, because they were just doing not indecent things, but like, yeah, it was just a bit like, what the heck's going on? And this is kind of back row action, so get up the back row. But why would you do this there, especially there's somebody behind you? That was more annoying. So as I say, cinema etiquette is a thing, and the more people in the screen, the more risk that you get bad cinema etiquette. But I blame the cinema staff themselves. I said about these boys in the screen, and I counted how many times the staff were coming in, to actually check. And I think Cineworld do this the best. Cineworld, I say, go into the screen every half an hour, especially in Newport. I'll say this, in the Cineworld I go to in Newport Spitty, they go in the screen every half an hour. They come in with a little eye thing, and they look in to see if people are obviously recording the screen, and they're just checking, and then they're walking out, and it's fantastic. And when I went to the View, I thought, I'm going to check, and somebody came in at the beginning of the film, which is when the boys were really quiet, in fairness, and it was all fine, and we never saw anyone since for the entire film. We had to, when I used to work in, because I used to work in Showcase Cinemas, so from the other side of it, in terms of being an usher and actually going through the screens, we had to do a screen check. We had like one usher on each gate, so they take tickets and stuff like that. We had two ushers then cleaning screens, so they had a specific order. They had to clean the screens, obviously, in between shows and whatnot. And then we had another usher then that would be on screen checks. And we used to have to walk around the screens with a piece of card, and we had to like snap off every screen. So it was like a little paperclip, I guess, and be like, yep, been in that one, been in that screen, been in that screen. And we had some fundamental things that we had to check. We had to check the temperature. We had a temperature gauge in there, so the temperature had to be, it couldn't be above or below, it had to be in this range of appropriate temperature. We also, of course, had to check if all the lights were off. We also had to check if the screen projector was actually working, the film was on, and the sound was working, and all of that, the obvious things. But we also had to check rows, and if the screen was more than a specific capacity full, we also had to go up and down the aisles in terms of walk up the steps, walk back down the steps. Now, Cardiff View Cinema do this a lot, but as I say, Merthyr didn't. They didn't even come in the screen more than once. And it does come down to staffing, because staffing in View in Merthyr, they literally have 3 members of staff, if not 2. They have hardly any members of staff running that cinema, so they don't have, the capacity that we had. We must have had on a Saturday, a busy Saturday anyways, we would have had probably 30 members of staff on, ranging from box office staff, concession stand, versus of course managers and ushers who obviously take the tickets. We had a lot of staff on at one point in the cinema that I worked in, and we needed it because we had such a big site. It was 12 screens, but it was such a huge site with a inbuilt Costa. We had a lot going on in there, and cinema etiquette was always something to deal with. I used to have people come out and be like, I've got a problem, and then cinemas would just literally give them free tickets. So like if somebody made a complaint, then they would just give them a free ticket to come back next time. And then working on box office, I used to have they would come in with the different slips, and I think they were different colours for each month and whatnot, kind of thing. But that was the solution, to just give people free tickets rather than actually like nip it in the bud of throw the people out, which we did do. You do that. If you have to, you will. And it can be difficult, but people do just, it's always been a thing. And I worked in the cinema over 10 years ago now, so it's definitely been a thing since way before COVID, because I've seen a lot of people say that cinema etiquette's gone down the pan since COVID, but I personally think it's always been there, to be honest. And yeah, that is my story to cinema etiquette, basically. Like, I've had a pretty bad experience over the last couple of days, and I thought I'll make a little video about it, talking about it, and I guess then on the flip side, how I would see it on the other side, actually working in the cinema. And this is a bit of a plea to you guys. Do you have any cinema etiquette stories? Let me know down below. Let me know your stories. Let me know what bad experiences you've had. Go into specifics if you want to. I'd really appreciate it. And hopefully cinemas take note and actually remove people from the source, because I think the only way to really get cinema etiquette nipped in the bud is actually getting people out of cinemas and removing them from the screens entirely. But they also need the staff to be able to actually check the screens, because if the smaller cinemas that have less staff don't have the staff to check the screens, then in fairness to them, they can't do anything about it, because if they can't check the screens, they've got to be elsewhere because they've got to be more front of house. So it is a catch-22, and of course we do live in an age where cost cutting is a massive thing, especially in the cinema industry. But yeah, there is my video on cinema etiquette. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and as I say, let me know your experiences down below of any bad ones that you've had. I really am interested to know your experiences. But thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos coming soon, and of course, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.